here you can see some really deep hunting. And probably that's why we use that awesome. We do very sharp,
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Katrina Stevens. I'm a third year at SUNY Upstate Medical University in New York, and I'm the current lead coordinator for GOMI. We're super excited to have Dr. David Hillebrant here to join us today for a talk on mountain medicine. For those of you who are joining us for the first time ever, our mission here at GOMI is to create an educational platform where interested students and healthcare professionals can explore and interact with wilderness and emergency medicine. We work really hard to showcase a wide range and diverse spheres where physicians, as well as other healthcare professionals, can be inspired and really think of different ways to use their degrees in unique ways. And we also work to create an international community of wilderness medicine enthusiasts and experts. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Twitter and Instagram is kind of where you'll find the most up-to-date information on the lecture series. And YouTube, you can check out our previous lectures for free. All the recordings are available there. And take a look at our website if you want to see previous lectures, as well as upcoming events. And if you by chance have your cell phone out right now, you can scan the QR code to join our mailing list. We're going to be continuing with the bi-weekly lecture series next semester. We also have other wilderness medicine opportunities, as well as the fellowship showcase will be coming back in 2023. We'll also drop the link in the chat as well. And coming soon, we're working really hard right now to get together our speaker lineup for fall of 2023. Our estimated start date for next semester is going to be the week of August 22nd. So stay tuned, join that mailing list, check out our social media for the most up-to-date information. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. David Hillebrant. Our quick bio. So Dr. Hillebrant started walking the hills age 6 and rock climbing at age 14. He works as a general practitioner with an interest in rural pre-hospital emergency care. He has climbed throughout the world with expeditions to Pakistan, India, Mongolia, and Chile and Patagonia, and has made first ascents of both rock and ice routes on the sea cliffs of southwestern England. During his time, he has also managed to become president of the UIAA Medical Commission, vice president of the ISMM, and the medical advisor to the British Mountaineering Council, Jagged Globe, and the British International Federation of Mountain Guide Associations. Unusually for a non-academic GP, he has also published several papers on mountain medicine. And with that, I'll turn this over to you. Welcome.
I think, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, that's excellent. Now, I'm meant to be sharing. It says I am screen sharing. Is that correct?
Yeah, right now we see your Zoom
Lovely.
your desktop.
Right, that's okay. You're allowed to see that. The problem is hidden behind your faces. There it is what I'm after. Lovely. Right, show from beginning. Excellent. Right, well, welcome to you all. I always find it a bit unnatural talking to a screen and knowing that there are people out there who I can't really see clearly. But firstly, thank you to Katrina and Jesse for inviting me along. And I'm glad I'm allowed to indulge myself for about 45 minutes. I can't see if anyone's taking any notes, but just don't bother. There's no academic facts in this. It's just me throwing out some random thoughts. And I suppose the most critical thing I want to get across is that in mountain medicine, it's actually your mountain skills that are valuable. Medicine normally only forms a small part of that. And with that in mind, I thought I'd just ramble through my climbing life a bit for you, and hopefully stimulate some thoughts. Anyone here who sees mountain medicine as being dramatic and exciting is planning the wrong mountain medicine trip. Most of mountain medicine on a trip is actually dealing with blisters, the shits, traveler's diarrhea, and things like that, skin infections, fungus, athlete's foot, really boring bread and butter stuff. And if you go with a group of people who are planning anything more dramatic than that, you got the wrong friends. So I thought I'd start with a picture of a younger me, a lot younger, a lot fitter, and a bit lighter too. This picture's taken in the Avon Gorge, and it must have been taken in the, gosh, let me work it out, in the 70s. Equipment's changed a bit. The guidebook in my hands is now 3 times that in thickness, and I'm interestingly wearing a traditional Willens harness, which was notorious for taking your testicles off if you fell off. So a bit of a worry there. I prefer the more modern designs. I did fall off in one once, and you reach down and you quickly go, oh, 1, 2, 3, thank God they're all there. The Avon Gorge, which that picture was taken at, and this one is about a 200-foot cliff in the city in Bristol, and is 2 hours drive from London, where I trained. So it was a day trip for us as university students, and it gave fantastically good climbing. Trouble is, like all limestone, it gets a bit polished, but absolutely magnificent. There's a main road below it. You pull over the railings at the top, tie yourself to the railings, and the ice cream vans will come over and sell you the ice cream without taking the money till your mate comes up. So an atmospheric place to climb. This is just one of my mates climbing on what in Britain is a hardvias. I think that's about 5'9" or something route. And again, it's rather fun to look at his old gear. We're still in touch. And here I am on a wet day, aid climbing out of a cave. Of course, like all these things, that's really old-fashioned, and we used to just do it to play around. Of course, that route now goes free at some ridiculous grade, and the old peg holes are used as handholds. We didn't just climb there. Other places we used to go from London when I was at university are North Wales, which has magnificent rocks, the mountains of Snowdonia, and a place I still love. You can see a classic climb there on one of their mountain cliffs. There were a group of us who were a bit odd, I suppose you would say, in that we always prided ourselves in climbing in the rain on wet, greasy, vegetated rock. Esoteric, I think, is the name given to the climbs. Certainly very character forming. Not sure what sort of characters evolved from this, but most of us apparently are now respectable members of society, although doesn't always follow. Anyway, this is the Devil's Kitchen, high up in the mountains. It actually gives fantastic winter ice routes when they form, but we were climbing there in the summer, and this is a climb known as the Devil's Staircase. And as you can see, brilliantly unpleasant. and a real challenge in pouring British rain with soggy ropes and vegetation. Why do I enjoy it? I don't know. I do actually also enjoy nice, warm, dry rock. This is just the view of a valley in North Wales where the other pictures were also taken. And there's good walking. And right down, does my pointer show up on your screen?
It does, yes.
Oh, excellent. There you'll see a little hut. That's Helig, Welsh name. And it was an old road mender's hut that was the first climbing hut in Britain, owned by the Climbers Club, a very traditional rock climbing club founded in 1898. I suspect those of you on the west coast of the USA, they were only just beginning to get wagon trains arriving then, I think. American history isn't brilliant, but we were beginning to get our first mountaineering huts. And this is a particularly lovely spot. Here it is. It was, as I say, an old road builder's hut, but it's been enlarged and enlarged over the years. Was actually one of the places where the 1953 Everest expedition, with the first ascent by Hillary and Tenzing of Everest, did their training. Although it's only about 600 meters there, they were trying out their oxygen equipment there, and it's full of traditional old climbing gear and memorabilia. Lovely place to stay. The Climbers Club was a very, well, we used to think of it, we used to bivouac or camp close within sight of it, and always saw it as a group of grumpy old climbers who were past it. I'm pleased to say I'm now a member. So things gradually change during your life. And it's one of the founding climbing clubs in Britain, together with the Alpine Club. And you have to be elected in, but we're always keen to encourage younger members, although they don't always see it that way. On the subject of the Alpine Club, you've obviously got the American Alpine Club. In our own snobbish way, the British are very proud to have the Alpine Club. No nationality, because it was the first one in the world. And even the Swiss, if you turn up on one of their Alpine huts and say you're from the Alpine Club, they always laugh at it because they know the history. Anyway, as I say, you get older, and here's another friend at Helig for a barbecue we held. What we found out actually during this trip was, I'm sure you have Zimmer frames in the USA for your old decrepit people, geriatrics, care of the elderly, call it what you want, whatever's politically correct. But we suddenly realized with extendable legs, the Zimmer frame can actually be used as a runner in a very large crack. So we did some tests on this. So you use your frame to get to the bottom of the cliff, and then you can climb a chimney and wedge it in as a runner. Much more ethical than bolting. The British are fairly anti-bolts. It's a tradition of traditional climbing. Just another picture of another friend from university. Mate Andy, I've been to the Himalayas with him. We've climbed throughout Britain. We've skied abroad, been to Nepal, and it just shows really how friendships from early in university continue. We're both approaching 70 now, and I'll be seeing him this coming weekend, where we will hold court in a course for lay mountaineers on mountain medicine. It's actually just an excuse for a whole load of us to get together and have a really good piss up, paid for by the British Mountaineering Council, which is nice of them. Although this year they seem to have caught on to the fact that we're mainly there for the party. This picture is actually taken in Scotland, approaching an ice climb, and Scotland is fantastic area for winter climbing. I used to interview people for expedition grants, and if they were going to somewhere like Patagonia, where the weather can be really horrendous, rather than ask them what alpine experience they had, we used to ask them what Scottish experience they had, because the weather is normally far more like this, and your navigation skills have to be pretty spot on. And here we are. I think this is on a diploma in mountain medicine course, and the guy on the left is again another doctor, and has a very impressive list of first ascents of ice routes, and ended up on Everest recently, saying he was determined to not use any rope on the top step, the Hillary step. But he said when he got there, he pulled on everything that was available. So interesting attitude. Whilst at university, we sort of started heading off to the Alps, European Alps. And I rather like this picture because the rope work is absolutely atrocious. That rope should be a lot shorter and a lot tighter, but we were pretty naive and got away with it. What's rather amazing is this will be in the, this will be about 1977, I should think. And I went back up to a hut on the ridge behind this last summer, a very smart alpine hut. When we went up there in the 70s, we walked past this smart hut and bivouac next to the glacier because we had no money. This time I turned up with my wife, and we were shown into a room that was just like a hotel room, quite honestly. And it was for a mountain conference. It's one of the largest huts in Switzerland. So things changed, and what had really changed, there was another guy of my age there who's a professional guide, and we were both looking at the glacier and absolutely shocked to see how much it had receded over the last 20, 30 years, and actually 40 years. No, 50 years, that's terrible, isn't it? And I was looking at it and thinking, I don't actually think I could find my way across it pre-dawn as we did in those days. But still, things change, and that's a rather frightening aspect of what's happening to our mountains. You have to go on your first, what I call proper expedition. So with a bit of alpine experience, a group of 4 of us decided that there were some suitable objectives in Pakistan, and managed to get a little bit of some grants towards it. I qualified, well, officially I qualified halfway through the expedition. Unofficially, I'd been told I had passed my final exams before I got on the plane. So I suddenly became the expedition doctor, which was, again, quite an experience. Did I know much? No, I knew virtually nothing. I'd managed to talk the dental part of the medical school into showing me how to do tooth extractions. I'd managed to spend quite a lot of time in the accident and emergency department picking up suturing skills and things. And I'd never been to any lectures on mountain medicine. I'd read a bit about altitude sickness, and in those days, the treatment for pulmonary edema, which was only just beginning to be identified as a killer, was furosemide, a diuretic, which some of you, I hope, will know is no longer used. It's a different type of pulmonary edema that you're getting with cardiac failure and altitude. So things were in their infancy, but then the new generation will be looking back at us today and realizing that we're still in the infancy because things always develop. So I had virtually no medical knowledge, but I built up a bit of climbing experience, and that was the important thing. What really struck us out here, apart from the heat and the cultural difference, these hills are big. They are very big, and just finding your way around was a real challenge and great fun. Pre-Google Maps, we were working off very poor quality maps. We had a Pakistani government military guy with us, a liaison officer, and he was amazed. The maps that we had were better than any he could obtain. We'd got them in London from the Royal Geographical Society. And I'd identified an unclimbed peak called Thui 2, which had been tried before. And we actually managed to get up it. It was, you had to be able to move fairly quickly on relatively challenging ground, carrying a heavy sack, and got used to high bivouacs, which was, I mean, just all a great learning curve, with a serious side to it, but tremendous. Enjoyed the culture difference, enjoyed the whole experience, apart from the shit, which accompanied any trip in those days. There is the top of Thui 2, and the last bit was interesting. I wasn't on the final summit bit, the other three went for it. I was lying with a leg that had been splinted by me. Here's the team. On the left, Chris, then Nick, then Inam ul Haq, the government liaison officer, and then Chris on the right, and I took the picture. All young, all naive. And I said there was a serious side to this, and there certainly was. By the next year or 2 years later, half the team had died in the mountains. The 70s and early 80s were, attitudes were different, and a lot of British Himalayan climbers, I'd never call myself top standard, but a lot of British climbers died doing some interesting things, but really pushing the limits of lightweight expeditions. Nick fell down a crevasse in Peru unroped, and Chris was with us on our next trip, which was part of a bigger trip for my wife and myself. So I came back to Britain, did what I think you would call internships, built up my medical skills a bit, and decided it was time to go away and play again. So my wife and I were fortunate enough to get hold of some money and decided to drive around the world, using an early Subaru with a bit of sponsorship. And here we are in the Sahara Desert, where we actually almost literally were bumped into by this Volkswagen, which was 3 other English guys who were going to cross the Sahara. At this point, we had about 1,000 miles to go, and had just left the end of the tarmac road, head off on, as they say, on the piste. What was interesting was one of the guys we met, we decided to travel together for security in case one vehicle broke down. They had spent a year kitting out their Volkswagen and realized it was far too heavy. They'd used heavy wood. So we had a massive bonfire on the first night out, and then kept going, and we arrived near the Hogger Mountains, which was fantastic because one of them climbed. I had climbing gear in the vehicle, and we managed a rather nice climb in the Sahara Desert, which for us was a near experience. And if you look carefully, I think you'll see on there that one of the runners is a piton in place. So obviously this climb had been done before, most likely by the French, who had been in charge of Algeria at the time. So another great experience. We continued on down through Africa, through the Congo and places to Kenya. And I was quite keen to climb on Mount Kenya. It's a most beautiful mountain, from memory about 17,000 feet. And to acclimatize, we spent 3 days walking round it before dropping back down and then going up to climb it with a guy I'd met in Nairobi, in the capital. Here we are on a 2-day climb up the peak on beautiful rock. And it was an interesting climb. I'd only met this guy at a cafe, got chatting to him. He was English and was getting back into climbing, having been unable to climb for quite a time. He was halfway up the climb when he told me why he hadn't been able to climb. He'd just done 10 years in prison for what we call grievous bodily harm. He seemed quite a nice guy at the time. And we got up to the summit. We slept out on an amazing ledge with a view over the African plains. And on the way down, our abseil ropes got stuck and he lost his temper a bit. And I suddenly had an insight into how he could have ended up with 10 years in prison. He was upset enough for me to volunteer to climb back up the rope to try and free it. So another interesting experience. Also an interesting story about this ledge. It was a very comfortable ledge with a little wall built round it. And about 15 years later, I was at the National Mountaineering Centre in Snowdonia on a mountain medicine course. And a guy called Oswald Oltz came over from the Tyrol region of the Alps, European Alps. And we got chatting, and he turned out to have been the medical student climbing this climb with a companion, and his companion near the top had fallen and broken his leg quite badly. And at this time, there were no rescue teams in Kenya. They were about a day's climbing up the rock climb. And he had to go down, tied him onto his mate onto this ledge, rappelled all the way down, ran down to civilization, got a message out, and a rescue team was flown out from Austria to undertake the rescue, which was successful. When we were on that ledge, I put my hand into a large crack between some rocks and actually found a bag of intravenous fluid that Oswald had brought up to him by the Austrian rescue team. So he couldn't believe it was still there. Very bizarre story. Shows how small the mountain medicine world is. I apologize for this picture. This was a 2-year drive around the world that my wife and I were doing. And when I was preparing this talk, I realized that during the COVID lockdown, I'd set myself the task of digitalizing a whole load of my old slides. And I actually must have got bored, and I didn't do any of them ones of America, the whole American continent. So this is the only slide I've actually stolen off some library. But I just wanted to let you know I have been there, and you have got some amazing climbing. And again, it's the friends you meet who are incredible. We pulled into what was then called Camp 4 in Yosemite in our vehicle. I think it's now called Sunnyside, and I know you now have to book and everything. But we just pulled in, pitched our tent, and within a few hours, this other English guy turned up, and it was my mate John English from medical school. And he said, "Oh, the three of us out here, we were, it was going to be 4, but somebody had to drop out." Now, Sally, who's my wife, could not believe, and still to this day does not believe, that that was pure coincidence that we were there at the same time. But we were, and we managed to get some climbs done together, which was a total buzz. And I'm again still in touch with John, who is a dermatologist who did his elective period in California. And of course he did it not because of the quality of the dermatology, but because of the quality of the rock, which seemed quite logical under the circumstances. Anyway, that's just to prove I have been to America, but that's not my photo. As part of this drive around the world, which was quite an adventure in itself, I did work in Australia and unofficially in some African countries. We incorporated another climbing trip, and this is Chris, who had been on our previous Himalayan trip. We all met up in India this time, and attempting some other peaks. And as I said, out of 4 of us, Nick was killed in Peru. This is a picture of Chris on our main objective, and we were climbing unroped. He fell off just after this photo. So we spent a lot of time, well, a bit of time, walking around into the valley he'd gone into to see if we could find his body. We never did. So it was a bit of a sad trip, but we did decide to continue climbing and climb this peak called Kogaya Dosht, which is the, whoops, have I lost that? I have, haven't I? Let's try that again. Whoops, something awful has happened to this slideshow. Let's try again. Here we are. Yeah, climb this peak, which is called Kogaya Dosht, which is the Hindi, I believe, for lost friend. And as his dad said, it was the biggest gravestone he could ever have had. 2 of us went up that. It was, again, totally exploratory mountaineering. And we went up one way through an ice fall onto the main ridge. And this is taken on the way down, where we found a much easier way that we could have got up, but we hadn't been able to see it from below. Oh, and that's just to show we got to the top, although that could be anywhere in the world, couldn't it really? But I can tell you it is the top. And if anyone wants to be cheeky and say, why didn't I go a bit further to the left? The answer is, it was a big cornice and I wasn't playing that game. So that's me on the top. What I did realize during these Himalayan trips was I really can't acclimatize. I'm very, very slow acclimatizer. Going on to Mount Kenya before we went to the Himalayas was a really good move. But I struggle with acclimatization. I just tend to sit there, feel miserable, have a headache and vomit. My wife's much better than me, so she used to wander around on Mount Kenya looking happy whilst I felt miserable. So I had to look for somewhere else in the world to go. And a friend here in Devon, I live in the southwest of England in Devon. The southwest is the big footy bit that sticks out towards America. And we have good sea cliff climbing. And a good friend from there had been down to Patagonia, to Tierra del Fuego, on a trip. And he came back with these stories of lots and lots of unclimbed mountains. And what's brilliant is they're only about 8,000 feet high, but they start at about sea level. So it was just 2 of us, got on a plane, flew down to Santiago in Chile and then down to Punta Arenas, had a chat with the Chilean Navy, who are very pro-British. Apparently, many of them come to Britain and come to the southwest of England to a large naval base to train. So they seemed quite happy to lend us a boat, a gunboat, with a crew of about 5 to take us up the Beagle Channel and down the Beagle Channel. They've done this on several trips. On this first trip, we didn't use them. We used them to get out of the mountains, but to get in, we found a British yacht in the Beagle Channel at Puerto Williams, the southernmost city of the world, it said. And it had a husband and wife team, Lord and Lady something, who were sailing around the world. And they offered us a lift up the Beagle Channel. So I, instead of getting altitude sick, I was seasick and vomited all the way up the Beagle Channel, which is a channel between Argentina and Chile, and was politically very sensitive at the time. And we went to attempt this magnificent peak called Roncalli, which is about 2 days walk from the sea. And the only thing at the sea is a little estancia, a little farm with a husband and wife who looked after some cattle. They were there purely to increase the Chilean territorial claim to the area. And he and I went off to give this a try. Unclimbed, he'd been to the area before, he knew the glaciers and things. And here we are at base camp, and you're beginning to say, hold on, this was a 2-man trip. Why are 3 people in this photo? Well, on the left is an Australian who we bumped into at the airport, who seemed to spend a lot of time drifting around the world. And he asked us if we were going to the Torres de Paine, and we said no, we weren't. We were going to Tierra del Fuego. And he said, where's that? And we said, oh, it's much more fine than Piney. Do you fancy looking after our base camp and carrying loads for us? He said, oh, why not? And came down. He'd never seen an ice axe or crampons before. And there's now a peak above our base camp. It's actually only a day's climb above us, called Pico Oz, because he was on the, he did the first ascent with us. And you may wonder who the lady is there. And that's actually the wife of the guy. She and her husband own the boat. And because the boat, he wasn't totally happy with the anchorage. They were both going to walk to base camp with us. She volunteered to walk with us, and he stayed on the boat. It was an interesting 2 or 3 days before she walked back down, accompanied by an Australian friend, because my mate ended up marrying her when he got back to Britain. So on a 2-man expedition, a lot more happened. There is an official expedition report lodged in the Alpine Club and the Royal Geographic Society, and it does say, beware of passing English yachts. But that's the only clue to this. Ian and she had 3 children, and one of them is getting married in about 2 weeks. In his family, his grandfather, his father, he and his children have all climbed, all do climb, and have done first ascents of rock climbs in the southwest of England. So it's quite a long family tradition. He's an interesting character. Obviously, we're still in touch. Sorry about this. Going on. Yeah, well, I will continue talking and hope that stops in a moment. Sorry, I also do pre-hospital care for the ambulance service, but that one's not close to where I am, so I can ignore that. I thought I'd turned it off. Anyway, the climb up the mountain was very interesting. Ian and I didn't manage it. He spent the next year or two trying to sort out his emotional life. And I went back with a couple of other friends. And this is possibly one of the most hairy pitches I've ever climbed in my life. I'm the black dot at the top. There's 150 feet of rope going across this snowfield. And you can just in the mist see the summit of the mountain. So we did get up. Funnily enough, about 2 or 3 years ago, I woke up feeling scared, remembering this slope. That is that was covered with fresh snow, and it was a classic avalanche angle. And it was possibly one of the most stupid things I've ever done, but it wasn't, because I survived. So I must have got something right. And the other two were great guys to be away with. I've got to say a few words about the Diploma of Mountain Medicine, which started up in Britain. It's an international qualification. Started up in Britain about 15, 20 years ago, and gave me a lot of a buzz, and I'll explain why in a few moments. Here we are at the National Mountaineering Centre running it. It operates in the USA now and Canada. And I'm quite proud to say a lot of the American people who started running it actually did their course in Britain. It's a great way of meeting other mountain medics, and 50% of the syllabus is actually working in the mountains. Rope work skills, belaying skills, and things like that. So it also gave me an excuse to go up to Scotland every year as we run one of our courses up there in this beautiful countryside, which we got up there. But I was then about to go on what I call the hardest expedition of my life. This is me, big sick in a hospital with acute pancreatitis from gallstones. This is my wife holding my hand. And basically she and the kids came along to say goodbye to me. I was ventilated for 40 days. And when I started regaining consciousness, a guy in a bed next to me said to his visitors, "Oh, don't bother to talk to him, he can't talk." And what he didn't know was I was lying there reliving a whole load of climbs in my mind and just going through them to sort of give me a bit of a kick up the arse. And it was an experience, I'll say that. I've been stoned on more drugs than I suspect any of you ever have been. I went through my medical notes and tell you which are good to trip on and which aren't. Ketamine's really nice, by the way. But anyway, that was a bit of a struggle, and I was a bit knackered afterwards, to put it mildly. A group of my contemporaries, mainly intensivists and anesthesiologists, were climbing Cho'oyu at the time, and they were actually getting my biochemistry and stuff being sent out to them by other friends, and they opened a book on me, and I defied their odds and managed to get to survive. You can tell that because I'm still here. That involved intensive rehabilitation, and for my arm strength, I took up kayaking on the beautiful southwest coast, which is world-class kayaking, fantastic, with amazing wildlife. It also meant I was still alive to enjoy things with my children. That's my son. He's a ski instructor and boot fitter. That's my daughter. She's a ski instructor and primary school teacher. And they now look after me on the hills, which is about time. I've paid for enough lift passes. And we still manage to get out skiing together, which is a real buzz. And this photo was taken about a month ago in the French Alps. And you can see that my grandchildren are now into skiing. James, age 6, This holiday became capable of crossing, traveling on the mountain from piece to piece. And his sister actually managed to eventually to learn to stop in a snowplow turn. Before she just enjoyed not stopping so much, she just went on until someone grabbed her. But so things are progressing, which is actually really exciting as you get older. When I was recovering from this period of illness, I had to learn to walk again and things. And by pure luck, my mate here, Paul, who's a pharmacist in our local chemist, said he wanted to try climbing, which was great because I was back at the lowest grades, reclimbing the classic routes, and he was learning. So we've done a lot of climbing together. And what I realized was that you can use a kayak to find your climbs. This whole cliff, this is taken from a drone, had no climbs on, and it's not actually visible from the land anywhere. And Paul and I managed to put up about 20 or 30 new climbs here, all at an easy standard, but great fun and real exploration. So it makes you wonder, how much longer can I keep going? And I'm not sure. I can keep talking for hours, but you're only allowing me a short time. But this was a photo taken about 2 weeks ago. I was out kayaking and we found our way into this bay, and again, completely invisible from the land. These cliffs haven't been climbed. I've looked ahead, and in 2 weeks' time, there'll be a low tide. Hopefully the weather will be good. And there's some lines there that to me don't look too difficult. So Paul and I'll be having a go at those. So have I taught you any medicine at all? No, none. But what I have, I hope, got across is that it's the people you climb with, which as you get older become the really important things. It's not the grades, it's the friends you make. We're still in touch. It's the need for those mountain skills. People say, oh gosh, you've been an expedition doctor. The answer is no, I haven't. I've never gone on an expedition where I wasn't very much a climber with the other climbers. I may have been with someone who was professionally a mountain guide, although I wouldn't pay him to go with him. And he would throw in more rope skills than I've got. I'd throw in more medical skills. I've been with someone who's an accountant. He looks after the money. So we all throw in our skills, but it's all very much on an equal basis. I do advise commercial expedition companies, but I struggle with the concept of commercial expeditions. It's the excitement of going somewhere completely new, knowing that no one's been there before, even if that's a 80-foot sea cliff in the southwest or a peak in the Himalayas. What messages should you take away? Don't listen to your tutors. Don't listen to your teachers. They'll be single-minded. They're academics. They're on a career path. Enjoy your life, enjoy your medicine, and enjoy your hills. And it doesn't matter if you never reach the top of your profession. What you want to do is have fun on the way there. And I hope that's a message in itself that's more important than anything else. I did fail 1 or 2 of my exams on the way through, by the way. And I actually gave up climbing for over 3 months at one stage. So thank you for letting me indulge myself. And I hope, Katrina, that was the sort of thing you were after, or possibly not, but that's what you got anyway.
Thank you so much for that presentation and the positive messaging at the end. I feel like that's something we try to promote here at GOMI, is really, pursuing our careers, but also pursuing your passions at the same time. At this point, if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and drop them on the chat, or if you're brave, you can unmute yourself and ask. I have one question while people's kind of wheels turn. You mentioned that a couple of your expeditions had sponsorships or grants. How do you go about kind of finding those resources?
In Britain, we're extremely lucky in that, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this screen sharing thing, but I'm just going to try that again. Oh, it looks better. Oh no, I don't know. You just have to put up with it. Oh, well done. Someone's done something clever centrally. I never really very good at IT. How do you get the money? Really good question. No one makes money in mountain medicine world. So keep your day job, because ultimately it may pay reasonably well, and that's a mega bonus. In Britain, we're very lucky. When Everest was climbed in 1953, on the proceeds of their book and film, they actually made a profit, which they invested. And they have the Mount Everest Foundation, where you go along and you get interviewed by some well-known mountaineers. I used to be on the interview committee at one stage, and it was great fun interviewing people. And they have money to hand out, not a vast amount, but once you get approval from the Mount Everest Foundation, when you approach manufacturers and things, they know you're a bona fide expedition who's been well screened. So that brings in equipment and things. And the good news is that's open to British and members of the Commonwealth. Now, I'm sorry, America, you had a revolution and you threw us out and you're not eligible. But there are grant giving organizations in the USA. And that does help. Industry sometimes brings some things if you can come up with a slant. I would say don't bother to use the medical research slant. It's been well tried. I've never done any research on expedition. I go to enjoy myself. Those that have say it's very hard work, and then you've got all the publication of papers afterwards and stuff. So I don't do that. Yeah, but most of us are fairly self-funding. I mean, Nick's sister worked for British Airways, so he got free tickets there. You just got to be devious. And when you're doing an expedition report, always remember the best gear is the free gear. Although be constructively critical to the manufacturers, they do appreciate that. And if you say you're going to bring back photos so they can use for advertising. Any more questions? I can see 3 comments in chat, but I can't see what they say.
So all the 3 comments are saying thank you for a great time, and thank you for the great adventures and stories. So people are really appreciative of what you did.
All right. Well, I think that is the answer. You get out there and do it. There's no other way. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, my timing wasn't too bad. I was told to allow 10 minutes for questions, and I managed to make sure there aren't any. I can answer the odd technical question if you want. We also run the UK Frostbite Advice Service, 3 of us. So one of us is available all the time to give advice anywhere in the world. That's quite fun. We work with a professor of vascular surgery. More importantly, he's a climber. He's got the diploma in mountain medicine. What else do we do? Advising expeditions is always fun. I divide them into 2 types. Those that are commercial, who take people who want to experience mountaineering, and those that, if they have a commercial side, it's actually people who are real mountaineers who just happen to use the company for the logistics. and when you're assessing their medical problems or pre-existing conditions, the mental attitude of the two groups is completely different. The what I call the punters, you say, well, you know, the risk of your asthma at this altitude is no less than the risk of a serac fall between camp 1 and 2 on your expedition. And they suddenly go, what? Serac fall? Whereas the climbers grunt and say, fair enough. I'm aware of the serac risk, and I'll just add this to the list. So, yeah.
So we do have another question that popped up in the chat. Seb asks, what is your favorite breakfast on a mountain if you eat breakfast?
I eat anything I can. What's my favorite breakfast? I'm most likely, I suppose, being British, I should say porridge, but it takes a bit too much cooking. There are certain things I do say on a bivouac, though. Half an onion makes anything taste nice for an evening meal. My favorite drink, without doubt, is weak black tea with lemon and sugar in it. Because you can drink it when it's hot, but you can also drink it when it's cold. So if you're going to bed, you make up a water bottle of it. You wrap your sweater in the water bottle to keep your sweater warm. And then in the morning, you've got a cold drink before you start. And you've got a warm sweater with a bit of luck, which is nice.
So we have a second question in the chat. Shanna asks if you have any advice for emergency medicine nurses trying to find a pathway into mountain medicine or becoming a part of an expedition.
Well, I think the basic answer is very simple. Make sure you've got the right mountain skills. The medicine's actually dead easy. So I would regard a nurse as valuable as some doctors, possibly more so than some. And certainly in the UK, we've had American nurses doing our diploma in mountain medicine, which is opened, and this is an international qualification. And I'm pretty sure paramedics and nurses can do it in the USA or Canada. There are several branches of it. The Wilderness Medicine Society runs one of them. There's another course, well, about 3 courses in America. And I suspect you could do one of those courses, yeah. And once you're in the hills, you can ignore all the legislation and medico-legal rubbish. Just get on with the job. Shouldn't say that in America because you get sued for a lot more than we do. Any other comments at all?
I'm not seeing any, so I guess
Excellent.
that'll be all. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everyone for coming today.
You asked if you could use that as a recording. I don't think I said anything too outrageous, did I?
I don't think so.
Okay, then put it online. I'm happy.